Hey guys, what's going on? It's Steve Cronin. What is transpersonal psychology and what does it have to do with biohacking? That's coming up. Alright guys, what's going on? It's Steve Cronin, Transpersonal Psychology. Now this is what I went to graduate school for, so I'm a little biased in terms of why I think it has a lot to do with biohacking and the Quantified Self movement and why it's necessary to really understand this stuff before really kind of venturing in down deep into what we are calling biohacking. Biohacking, of course, being a very vague term, something I have made a video on already, trying to get a very loose definition on that so we can move forward, somewhat on the same page. And then, of course, you know, states of consciousness. I did a video on this recently as well. I'm not saying it's kind of like a requirement or a prerequisite for this video, but I will kind of be using some lingo and some terms from that video as well to kind of engage with this one, engage with you guys via this video. So, yeah, I'm biased because, you know, it's something I went to school for. That being said, I did get a bachelor's in poetry, and I don't really see much poetry going on in biohacking, so I think we're clear there. No what is poetry video coming out at us in the future. Okay, so transpersonal psychology. Let's break this term down, right? Let's break this field of study down. So transpersonal, that word was actually came from two different words of Greek origin together to make transpersonal, and those words being rooted, their English meanings being beyond, that's trans, right? And personal, the mask, or just mask, right? So beyond the mask, that doesn't really help us out very much. Well, good thing we have Maslow and Stanislav Grof because they are two of the founders of transpersonal psychology. I don't know why they called it transpersonal psychology. I myself probably would have called it identity psychology, or psychology of identity, or even psychology of the self might have worked. But you know, I'm not really one to question Maslow, so let's keep this rolling. Definitely not as smart as he is. So transpersonal psychology, yeah, beyond the mask. They kind of decided to use that word transpersonal just to describe what is beyond the mask being us, our identity. In other words, who are we, right? I mean, that boils down to like the basic question. Psychology, of course, depending on how you define it as well, to a lot of people means the study of the soul. And it's kind of like, well, what is the soul? Well, okay, in order to answer that, we need to know who we are. And that gets really kind of not very scientific and very kind of spiritual, which is fine as long as we recognize that those are two different boundaries that don't really talk to each other very well or mesh over very well, that being, of course, science and spirituality. While they might have some really cool correlations, this is why you get the Deepak Chopras and the Richard Dawkins of the world button heads, right? Is because they don't describe each other, right? They're separate fields of study, and they should be treated as such, at least in my opinion. Okay, so transpersonal psychology. Who are we? If I were to ask you a question right now, you know, who are you? How would you answer? And it'd be really cool if you just took the time right now to just kind of pause the video and write in the comments below before you keep watching this. Who are you? Just answer that question. I would probably answer it as follows, right? I would say I am, and then I would say I am Stephen Cronin, right? I am 27 years old. I work within cloud computing, okay? You live in Houston, Texas. I make videos for YouTube. I'm interested in technology, biohacking, quantified self, integral theory, right? And I would just go on and on at this list. Maybe I start talking about my body, right? I'm white, skin color. I'm of German and Polish descent. Get some ancestry in there. I have brown hair, some more of my physical experience. 5 feet 11 inches, right? So my height. These are very common answers. When you ask someone who they are, they're generally going to give you their name, maybe their profession, maybe a little bit about themselves in terms of their interests or how they identify with their history, like their ancestry, or their appearance, right? These are generally the kinds of answers we give. However, is that who we are, right? Can your awareness, and this is where the video on states of consciousness comes in, can your awareness, your state of consciousness, like within the waking state, being one of the major three, can that be reduced to a body or your profession or your name? Is who you are reduced to your name? Most of us would probably say no, right? So transpersonal psychology explores that idea of identity. Who are we? I think it was either Jack Kerouac or Allen Ginsberg, and here's my poetry coming in. Oh my gosh, how did this happen? But it was one of them, Allen Ginsberg or Jack Kerouac, who said that the purpose of beat poetry is to discover who we are, but before our parents were born, right? So generally, to me, that's a good definition of transpersonal psychology, guys. Like where were we before our parents were born? And that self, that awareness, that idea is kind of what transpersonal psychology is searching for. That's what, I guess, according to Kerouac or Ginsberg, beat poetry was searching for, is who is the self? What's our identity? How do we identify ourselves and the world, with ourselves being maybe our body or the world around us or other people, right? Within developmental psychology, we see generally 3 major stages of development that a human being goes through within their lifetime, moving from egocentric, so someone identifying with themselves, meaning their body and their needs, right? This would be on the low stage of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That's where he comes in. To ethnocentric, so maybe an individual identifying themselves with their family, so their needs are their families or maybe their communities, right? Or their nations, their country's needs. Some people are world-centric. That's the last stage, and those are 3 vague stages that encompass many in between. So these are people who maybe identify with the planet, with the universe, perhaps. So you can see where some of this language comes from, especially from a perspective of spirituality, in terms of like the universe is God, or I am the universe, or I am one. That kind of language. This comes from how we identify ourselves, and at what stage. And we haven't really gotten into stages. Well, I did a very long video on stages of consciousness. I may or may not have it pop up right now. But it depends on which stage of consciousness or stage of development you're coming from. And then, of course, what state of consciousness you're aware of, right, at the time to interpret an event that happens, or perhaps who you are, your identity. So how does this help us in biohacking or the Quantified Self movement? Or let's take Quantified Self first. So when I love this, this term, quantified self. There it is, that word, self, right? So we need to get a very good definition of the self, which we don't have, and that's totally fine, because I feel like all definitions have a significant amount of meaning in them, and the more definitions we get, fantastic. Not so great if you're trying to communicate with people, but if you're somewhat of a nerd like I am and want to seek a great, deep understanding through as many different perspectives as possible, then you're going to want more definitions of the self. Okay, so quantified self, that just means measure yourself, right? So what is it that we're measuring? Well, in quantified self, it's pretty clear that we're generally measuring our body, right? The measuring part takes care of that, because that's, of course, happens within the third-person objective scientific realm. Okay, you can't measure the first-person subjective realm. You can correlate, subjective experiences with physiological objective changes, perhaps, changes in your brain, physiological changes in your brain, whether you're taking a smart drug, for example, might correlate with a subjective awareness of an experience that changes when you take this drug, but you can't measure the subjective, at least not right now. So that's transpersonal psych is important in terms of defining the self, right? Quantified self. What is it that we're measuring? And I think it's pretty clear that we're measuring our body, but the only reason we do quantified self is to make some kind of change. And maybe that's a change in our behavior, which can be measured in the objective realm. That's fine. But it's closely tied to biohacking. Here's where the biohacking is going to come in. Maybe this will take smart drug use, since I've talked about smart drugs so much on this channel. What is it we're measuring with biohacking and the smart drug use? Well, we're talking about our subjective experiences, but we're not measuring them. Science doesn't cover the subjective, at least not yet. So transpersonal psych is important when we want to kind of talk about things and communicate things from a subjective versus objective realm. I've been posting a lot of these videos to certain communities on the internet and have received some flack being like, hey Steve, why aren't you doing more objective measurement type stuff with your smart drug reviews and smart drug use? And I talked about this a little bit recently in terms of, well, I think the average consumer probably wants to focus more on experiences and doesn't want to like read a bunch of papers on the issue or watch a very long video of me doing a self-experiment, or perhaps a short video of me giving you a synopsis of a self-experiment I did, and even then a self-experiment isn't science, so why should we really do it, etc. But the real reason is because you cannot measure subjective awareness. Not yet. It's an I category, and I'm going to make a video shortly about the 3 major perspectives of biohacking. And the I, which is the first person pronoun used to generally describe the subjective realm, cannot be measured. Okay, so you just, like I said, it's correlative only. So transpersonal psychology is very important to consider here. It's also very important to consider when we think about books like Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler, when he talks about peak performance states, flow states. Gotta get some of those videos coming out. So a lot of this philosophy is necessary, in my opinion, to kind of move forward with this channel and, of course, the topics of biohacking and quantified self movement. That's it, guys, for this video. Stay tuned to this channel if you want future product reviews, future biohacking videos, quantified self videos, or even philosophy ones like this. Take care.